So welcome to our Equity in Action Praxis sessions. I'm Nika Hogan, and with my colleague Lauren Service, we had this idea to feature the work of the brilliant and talented California Community College educators, particularly those who've taken our online course, Equity 101, where people do significant reflection and knowledge building and kind of culminate their work in a praxis project. And so where they're thinking about what is something that they can do to create more equitable outcomes right from where they sit. And so our presenter today is Professor Janet Mitchell-Wagner from Cerritos College and Pasadena City College, because some of us have to be overachievers. And so just before I turn the session over to Janet, we also just want to remind you, we invited you to consider and set some norms for how we want to be together in this space, even in this space, which is not necessarily, for many of us, our ideal kind of learning space. We can still, part of being equitable is being in touch with our own responses and being able to reflect and interrogate our responses and sort of see, are we contributing to this kind of space that we wish to be in? So there's just there as a reminder to you, and we have that Google document as well that was part of the email invitation. Just the reminder, and for newcomers who haven't been to these sessions before, Praxis is reflection and action upon the world in order to transform it. And so that's what our focus is. We are trying to move from this talk about being equity-minded to thinking more about embodying equity. So what does that mean and what does that look like? And within a larger structure and system that can be overwhelming, what can we do from where we stand to make things better for students and to contribute to the social justice mission of the California community colleges? And part of that too is just listening and giving people a chance to share the wonderful work that they're doing. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand the presentation over to Janet.
Thank you so much, Nika. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank everyone for coming. This is an honor to be able to present for 3CSN. And with Nika, I've known her for a very, very long time. And so this is wonderful. She's somebody I look up to in many ways. So I want to start out by sharing that I have a lot of takeaways. I'm that kind of person that when I go to sessions, I want takeaways, and you will get them all. In fact, Lauren's going to put the handout in the chat at some point, but please don't worry about it right this minute because I want to put it into a context. And I'd like to share with you that in 1990, I transferred from Pasadena City College. I graduated from there as a community college student to UCLA, and I was part of a teaching cohort, and I was lucky enough to hear Mike Rose speak. And Mike Rose, if you don't know, is author of Lives on the Boundary, and he's very much about equity-minded teaching practices. And one thing that he said stood with me, and that is there's a statistic about the #1 indicator about students who actually attend college. And that #1 indicator is that the students, their parents attended college. And when I heard that, I felt very conflicted because I was like, wait a minute, I'm not here to try and get students whose parents go to college to attend college. I really wanted to be there to inspire anyone who wanted to go to college to go. It highlighted the class system for me, and it really influenced what kind of educator I was when I started teaching at Crenshaw High School, where none of my students' parents attended college, and I saw it as my mission to make that happen. Fast forward a few years later, I was earning my master's degree, and I was in an assessment class with statistics, and we were to create a survey and give it to people and try and get valid and reliable results. What happened was the teacher said, oh, you shouldn't write your own. It's very difficult to write your own. And I was very against that. I was like, I'm a teacher, I can do this. I write assignments, I give grades, I can do this. And I did it, and it was a terrible flop in terms of a survey, in terms of yielding valid and reliable results. And it was at that point that I really realized that grades were bullshit. And I really was very conflicted as a teacher as what to do about that. So today's session is about grades, and it's also about assessment and reflection. And I'm here to share with you that I am not the only person who sees grades as being bullshit. Inouye argues that traditional writing assessment is grounded in white privilege. Nelson contends that traditional testing is a deficit model which focuses on what students can't do. And Cohn asserts that more meaningful learning occurs without grades and advises that conferencing and reflection be how students are assessed. Now, the truth is, I am a teacher. I don't want to work outside the classroom to try and make big changes. I want to make those changes within my classroom. And so I have to work with grades. And so I'm always on that line of trying to figure out how to assess students in an equity-minded manner. A few years later, I had a wonderful class that asked me a question that I had never been asked before. And many times when I was being evaluated, nobody wanted to hear this, but that question was, what do you want your students to learn? And I never, I always have to deal with the standards, with the SLOs that, I want to teach them how to write the scholarly essay as an English professor. But my view is much bigger than that. I want to be able to show students how to learn in a system that is inequitable. As we've seen, I want to be able to support students in believing in themselves as writers. I want them to see themselves as writers because they all are writers, whether or not they're English majors or not, whether or not they're college students or not. All of them are on their best friends, right, their phones, and they are writing, and they are actually making a difference. And I want to also be able to help students be empowered to use their voices as change agents in society. Furthermore, I really appreciated Laura Rita's definition of assessment or thoughts about assessment. And she argues that students themselves are in a better position to judge many of the qualitative dimensions of their learning. So it's not just that grades are bullshit, but it's that students themselves can look at their work and they can critique themselves. And this was a huge aha moment for me. So I thought that was really important that students can do that. And I think that her particular viewpoint really changed the way that I saw what my students should be doing in the classroom. So in keeping with Alfie Kohn and Laura Rita, I really wanted to focus quite a bit on reflection and reflective learning. And I want to take a moment to share that reflective learning is actually a very active, conscious practice that requires time to look at thinking and learning. It involves asking questions, seeking out information and research to aid one's understanding. And it puts the learner at the center. And I wanted to take a moment to talk about the fact that there is a chronology to this, that reflection is not just something you do afterwards, it's something you do before, it's something you do during, it's something that you do after creating something, whatever that something is, whether it's a writing project or making chocolate chip cookies. And the truth is that it's emotional. And that is part of it. It's not something that is just this cut and dry, valid and reliable thing. It's something that's very personal when it's something that's meaningful. A few other items to think about in terms of the value of reflection is that it gives a live picture of one's growing. It documents a record of your thoughts and ideas throughout the experience. It demonstrates that you are learning over time, And it becomes a wonderful artifact to help identify your strengths, challenges, and preferences in learning and thinking, and gives you help to think about what you're going to be doing next. So in looking at the big picture, reflective learning is actually formative assessment, which helps focus on growth and helps to develop students as decision makers and creates agency. And that is the social justice aspect of reflection and reflective learning. And being a teacher in a classroom who has to give grades, but at the same time, what are you going to give grades on? How are you going to do that? How can we include this in as a way of saying, yeah, grades are bullshit, but we're going to do this and still work within that system. There's a few pieces of the puzzle that I like to give to students that I think are really important. The first is the learning pit, and if you haven't seen it, I have a little link here to a video about the learning pit. But the learning pit basically is this idea that when you are truly learning something, you're going into something and you have these feelings and it's hard and you have to figure out a way to get in and to get out. And what good learners do, that students who don't have parents who've attended college before, what students do, what's normal, is that learning is hard, that you have to try again, that it takes several revisions, and that good learners don't do it alone. And if you look at the very last part and you think about the idea of pulling people up who are right behind you, who are learning, that it's a collaborative activity. That's what learning is. Another piece of the puzzle is to reframe what learning is. Threshold concepts, if you've never heard of it, I have a link to Linda Adler-Kastner's Threshold Concepts. Threshold concepts are conceptual knowledge rather than a content or skills. And here are some of mine that I keep in place in any class that I teach. And these are things that I'm trying to help students realize, is that writers always have more to learn, myself included, Stephen King included, any writer included. That writing is recursive. You're going back again and again, and it's excursive. It's messy. It doesn't always go from A to B to C in a neat way. It also is very political. Writing is absolutely political, just like grades are. And it enacts and creates identities and ideologies. And I think it's really important for students to have opportunities to practice that and learn that and know that. One more piece of the puzzle includes the educator themselves. And this is part of my equity practices list that I created for 3CSN 101, Equity 101 class, that we need to reframe ourselves as educators. And this is dynamic. This never stops. This list that I created before the class, and I went back and revised again, and I went back and revised it again before the presentation today. It's dynamic. And so some of the practices that I wanted to share with you are ones that are going to be in the assignment that I created for students. That it's really important to share the purpose of assignments and encourage question asking about why they are learning what they are. To create a space for revision, metacognition, and reflection, again, back to reflection. To create a space for student agency, putting them at the center of making decisions, that they're not just doing what I'm telling them to do, but they're thinking about what they want to do with their own learning. Understanding that institutional biases frame our lenses, all of them, ours and our students. They come from a place where grades are very much ingrained in them. So I do not start out class telling them that grades are bullshit, but I do try to create a learning community where they don't have to be afraid of what grade that they are going to earn eventually in the class. And then finally, to maintain the attitude that students are bringing their best to the classroom. Students have something to offer, every single one of them, and they are bringing their best. And it is my job to help support and facilitate their growth. All right, so what I would like to do now is I would like to share an assignment with you called, and this is my final assignment that I did for Equity 101. It's called Show Me How You Self-Evaluation, which I believe I also have open here. Excuse me as we, here we, oh, I have to go from one to the next, sorry. On the rabbit hole, okay. All right. Excuse the delay. All right, so the assignment that I'm going to show you is called Show Me How You, and I'm showing you a single one, but it's one that I've developed for several different aspects of writing. I'm an English teacher, and so that's what I'm focusing on. But I would like students to be able to go back and look at their own writing and think about how they can show me how they've done certain things. So they've written their paper, and it's after the fact, and it's helping them to metacognitively look at their own paper. So it's called the Show Me How You Self-Evaluation. And the overview includes the aspect of the why. And that is part of being a scholar is reflecting and evaluating your own work. And really, I tell students, you know, I care about them as learners, and I want them all to do well, but we all have things to learn, and I want them to have input on their own work and not just try and take the teacher's input. So I value their input about their own writing because it is they themselves, far beyond my classes or any other classes they're taking in writing, it is they who make those choices about how to revise their own work. And so for each of their writing projects, I'm having them assess a different part. And for this one, it's body paragraphs, the one I'm showing you. Another one is about purpose, audience, and genre. Another one is about introductions. And so I look at different aspects each time. And so I've given them a graphic organizer below where I'm asking them to take their writing project right in front of them and to look for specific guidelines. So in terms of body paragraphs, I'm asking them to look to see, are there multiple body paragraphs that actually connect to the thesis? Because that's what we're asking them to do, and they can answer the question. But I want them to look into their papers and give me some evidence. So to copy and paste evidence and discuss why. I'm asking them to look at the claims and do these claims answer the how and why they've written what they've done? Is each claim supported by evidence? That's what we're looking for in scholarly writing. We want to look to see that we're using evidence from other writers. Have they done that, and have they included that in their body paragraphs? Is there the detailed analysis, a breakdown of what that means? Are the paragraphs developed enough to respond thoroughly to the prompt? I'm asking them about the length, and to me, this is one of the ones, I'm looking for it here, this one here. I want to know that they've gone beyond the obvious. I'm wanting to know that they're not just being careful and trying to get that A grade. So are the body paragraphs developed enough to respond thoroughly to the prompt? In other words, does it go beyond the obvious? And what I have found with this particular activity is that students tend to be tougher on themselves than I am on them. And so one of the things that I write to them after they've completed this particular assignment is I tell them, I really appreciate the deep analysis. You've earned the credit for doing this, whatever that is. I want you to take your own challenges and bring them to the next writing assignment. And so I'm not telling them that they're wrong about their criteria. I just don't want them to focus on thinking that I'm the only one who matters here. This is also a wonderful opportunity to be able to share this with the class. So I asked permission and asked students if they would mind if I share some of their examples with the class, and usually they're very happy to do so. And then the part two is I'm asking them, so Since we have to use grades, if you were to evaluate your overall performance about body paragraphs only, what would you give yourself and why? And again, going back, they tend to grade themselves harder than I do. And I explained to them, well, you've completed the parameters and best of luck. So that was the assignment that I wanted to share with you specifically. I also want to share with you that I have several assessment protocol and examples of assignments and guidelines that I use. And Lauren has shared that in the chat. And so I'm going to stop right here, except to say I do have a little thank you slide. So if you want to get in touch with me, you can. And a link to these wonderful contract grading resources that somebody else put together that I thought was wonderful. You'll see who they are as well. But I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to let Nika and Lauren do what they do.
Thank you so much, Janet. That was absolutely wonderful. And what we would like to do next is, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording so that we can get ready to go into breakout rooms. So